It's the state of the Nationals next on this edition of the Talk Nats podcast. Well, hello and welcome into this edition of the Talk Nats podcast, part of the Believe Podcast Network. I'm so glad you decided to join me today. As always, this podcast is free and available on all the major platforms. And the best way that you can help grow this show is to subscribe or follow the Talk Nats podcast on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you find your podcasts. Give it a 5-star rating, leave some comments. I sure would appreciate it. So in this edition of the Talk Nats podcast, we talk about the Nationals and kind of the state of this team. And the one thing I know about doing this show is, it changes from one show to the next. I've talked about highs, I've talked about lows, and we've seen both from this team this year. So I'll talk about that, the state of the Nats. I know it's a bit delayed, but I'll talk about Davey Martinez's comment saying it's not the coach's fault. And then I'll talk about the Nats' most recent game against the Dodgers. But just to get it going here, talking about the state of the Nats. And like I said, we've seen some ups and we've seen some downs this season from the Nats. But one thing seems glaringly apparent is that this team is still in full rebuild mode, retooling, semantics at the end of the day. And there was a real feeling going into this season that maybe it would be different, or maybe I should rewind time a little bit more, that going into off season at the end of last season, that the feeling was that next year, the Nationals were going to push all their chips in to this team, that they were going to go out and sign a Jason Worth-esque type of player. And what did they do? They didn't really do any of that. They signed some names that aren't definitely some of the sexier names in Major League Baseball, but it's not squarely on them. I think that on a lot of different levels, this team is struggling. I think you're seeing frustration boil over by Davey Martinez, who I'll talk about in the second segment, who I guess I would say is a little bit more level-headed usually. And then the questions from Rizzo and ownership about which direction this team should go in. As you see, a lot of teams around Major League Baseball getting better. There's some other teams that are kind of floundering. And, you take a look at it. The Nationals are not the Pittsburgh Pirates, for example. They're a larger market team. The DMV area is a bigger market. And historically, the Nationals have done great things. It's not like, the Lerners have never gone out and signed big players. See Scherzer, see Jason Worth, like I talked about, for example, that they are not afraid of spending money. But the question is how much longer does this team kind of just wander out into the wilderness? I would expect some big changes at the trade deadline. And also, I would say that, this is just me. This is just a guy that does a podcast on the Nationals. I would expect to see some change. I wouldn't expect to see Rizzo back. I wouldn't expect to see Davey Martinez back. That at some point you need to make a change. That I don't want the Nationals to go down the same tributaries as these perennial loser teams that are losers year after year after year. It's all about putting butts in seats, right? And it's about having a winning product. And, you take a look around Nats Park, and the different, jerseys that you see people wearing out there. It's not the names that they picked up in the offseason. You don't see a lot of Soroka jerseys. You don't see a lot of Nathaniel Lowe jerseys. When you look around Nationals Park, and I know there's naming rights up there. I'm still going to call it Nationals Park there, but is that you don't see a lot. You still see a lot of like Harper jerseys. I see those. But the promising thing is you're starting to see like James Wood jerseys out there, that there is a glimpse into the future and things around the Nationals. I think, the seeds have been put in place that this team is going to be good in years to come. But how many years? How many years will it take for those roots to grow in and for the branches to start growing? And what am I talking about? That you have James Wood, if we want to talk about present and future pieces, that he has a solid root structure, or that's what we're hoping anyway. And then it's the building pieces. You got Dylan Cruz, who's one of the branches on there, Brady House, that I think this tree is growing, but it's not quite where we had hoped for yet. I still think that this team needs to go out and sign an upper echelon starter. I'm talking a veteran, one to kind of mentor this young pitching staff, because, we've seen glimpses of greatness for MacKenzie Gore. I'll talk about in the third segment that they're still not there quite yet. And a lot of it is, two teams going in different directions, but I don't want to get into that too much. Let's dive into the latest with what is still my favorite team, and I imagine yours as well, the Washington Nationals. That's not going to waver out there. I'm not going to jump ship just because this team isn't playing that well right now. I think that they will be. The question is how long, right? And I think a lot of that is ultimately up to the learners, Rizzo, about when they want to start taking this team seriously. So let's dive into that in segment one. And to be clear here, this first segment here is a story that came out of talknats.com. Make sure and check out talknats.com. Check them out on Twitter, X, as they are a wealth of knowledge. I'll kind of give you my take on the piece that came out here somewhat recently. So let's dive into that in segment one here, talking about, the clock is ticking for this team. And let's call it what it is that the Nationals are back into a familiar spot. Looking at the calendar and realizing, yep, we're going to be sellers again. And I got to say, I don't hate it. If it means the greater good of this team, if you've seen what this team has flipped, and I'll talk about that a little bit later in this segment, if as long as they can get good returns on it, I think that was kind of the master plan. But I'll get into that in a minute here. Another July, another deadline, and another step in the rebuild that just won't. And dear Lord, let it end here. And, you talk about rebuilds. I cover the Capitals, of course, for Locked On Capitals, and they dealt with a retooling on the fly, a fairly painless one. And guess what? They made it to the second round of the playoffs. But again, two different teams, two different ownerships. It kind of makes you wonder what this team would be like under Ted Leonsis. Of course, you could throw the Wizards into that mix, and that kind of muddies the waters a little bit. But let's talk about the fifth straight year that we've been selling. The fifth. Since the big teardown in 2021, it's been rinse, repeat, deadline comes, talent goes. And, in this segment, I talked about that James Wood is the one that has the root structure, right? That he is what I believe. And I got to think that a lot of Nationals fans out there believe is the root structure of this team. That, we hope that it doesn't go down the route of, players that we've seen established and move on to greener pastures, in quotes, greener pastures. I'm talking Juan Soto, I'm talking Bryce Harper, that, if he is in fact the key piece, let's keep him here. But, this year, the names on the list, might sting a little depending on, how vested you are in the players. I'm talking Michael Soroka, Nathaniel Lowe, Kyle Finnegan, and I guess the one that might sting the most, I guess two of them in there. I would say that Kyle Finnegan and Luis García Jr., that we've seen glimpses of greatness from Luis García Jr., right? That I think that he could fetch a pretty good return, and Kyle Finnegan as well, as it did feel like the Nationals were going to be moving on from Kyle Finnegan last offseason. As it turns out here, and again, we're having the same conversation. Might be a little bit of a different outcome this season. These guys might not have their jerseys flying off the shelves at Nats Park, but they're part of the roster. And if the offers come in strong, they could all be gone. And again, I don't hate it. Some people, maybe a more casual Nationals fan might be saying, Dan, what are you talking about? Finnegan, he's the closer. He's the guy. And Luis García Jr., he's the second baseman. Yeah. How well has that fared for this team? I think that, unless we're talking about the top tier prospect talents, I'm talking Wood, Cruz, House, the guys I'm talking about. I think the Nationals should be willing to listen to offers on any of those players other than the top tier talent that I just mentioned. Some of the players that on paper seem to be the right guys, the right fixes, I don't think are the case. So it's tough questions. And I don't think that, the Nationals, I don't think Rizzo should have any real hard time moving on from these players. If I could think about, hear me out here. It's going to take the Nats worse in the short term, no doubt. But if you're Mike Rizzo, you got to think long term. You got to make teams pay like they did in 2017. If you remember, he fleeced Oakland for Doolittle and Madsen. And, you take a look at it, as I remember back on Doolittle and Madsen on those players. They're tactful moves. Oftentimes, covering both big name teams in DC here, you always hope for, the marquee name, the sexy name. But oftentimes they can kind of shoehorn these guys in here that, maybe not be the sexier names that you were hoping for. And, it might be a player that's on the move. You take a look at MLB.com already listed Kyle Finnegan in their top 14 trade candidates that he could definitely fetch a big return here. And so there's some intriguing names out there from different sources. And I don't really want to get into that because it's kind of pontificating and speculating at this point. But does Mike Rizzo have the cojones? Does he have what it takes to pull off a big move? Again, it's not so much for me that I don't think that Rizzo is in for making a big trade. I just don't think that maybe he has control of the purse strings, if you will. And you take a look at it, Finnegan's a free agent after the season, Soroka too. So if they're just short-term pieces, why not flip them? Luis García Jr., he's got team control. So yeah, that's a tougher call. But again, see what's out there. Listen, pick up the phone. Let's hear the offers. We want this team to be better. And, maybe they need to widen the scope. Maybe they even need to take it up to a 30,000 foot view and say, hey, maybe we even need to be a bit more aggressive yet. The one thing I know is Rizzo's not rushing into this. He didn't move Finnegan last year because the offers weren't good enough. And that's what needs to be glaringly apparent here is I don't want to make change for change's sake. I need upgrades. I want winning baseball back in DC. Is that a crazy thought to think of? And it's not like, the Nationals and their fan base hasn't struggled. They have struggled for seasons here. It's time to make it right. I remember going into spring training. I was optimistic. I don't want to lose that. I know that this season they might, not turn it around. And Lord knows they probably very well might not. But as long as there's hope, that's what keeps me in there. He'll wait, Rizzo, that is. But the deadline is July 31st. And get this, he's only got 20 days. Again, this piece a bit ago. If he wants to make one of those slick draft pick deals like last year. So those are all intriguing things to think about. You remember Hunter Harvey to the Royals. He got options there as well. With that comp pick, we drafted Caleb Lomavita, top catching prospect in the class. So it's not like, I take a look at the moves that are made. It's a team that is definitely built around the future. And the feeling was that were they going to pick up a big piece? I think that if you look at the prospects and that kind of thing, I think ostensibly this team is going to be a good team in the future. And talking about that, that deal there, that was smart. That was Rizzo doing Rizzo things. Could he do it again? Tigers, Brewers, Rays, Reds. You bet he's sniffed around. And I want something to make me have hope again, that all is not lost. And I think it's in there. It's going to hurt in the moment. The team gets weaker. The fans get frustrated, but that's the price of doing business in a rebuild. Sometimes you win big. And the one that kind of really stands out to me was Candelario. We traded him and got DJ Hers and Kevin Made. Hers was electric last year before the injury. Still, love DJ Hers' game, right? I think that, going in spring training, he was one of the guys that kind of popped, a very enthusiastic, like he'd pitch the ball and kind of just wait and just totally psyched up. The guy doesn't mail it in. So talking about DJ Hers, promising. But you take a look at it. Not every deal is a winner. The Scherzer Trey Turner blockbuster, still a sore spot for some fans. And, I get that there. But, Scherzer was not coming back. And the one that hurts the most, if I was going to put it in there, I would say it's the Trey Turner and Juan Soto. Those big moves hurt the most. I knew that Scherzer was going to be on to the next one. But you take a look at it, Lane Thomas was thrown in for Jon Lester, and now they've already flipped Thomas again for prospects as well. So that's how you rebuild, one smart trade at a time. And, the only thing is that I'm hoping for here is that I'm not talking to you perennially year after year after year, like, nah, believe it. Next year, they're going to be good. The sky is not falling. That's the tough thing. We hope that they have something up their sleeve here. But let's be real. Teams are going to call about MacKenzie Gore. That's a fact. But unless they're coming with a Juan Soto type haul, don't even answer the phone. You don't want a potential ace unless the return is insane, or trade a potential ace. So it's going to be interesting. But, talking about MacKenzie Gore, we've seen true glimpses of greatness from him as well. Hasn't been all great. I'll talk about him in the third segment here, but some intriguing names. And what do the Nationals have up their sleeve? After the break here, I'll talk about Davey Martinez, saying it's never the coach's fault. I know this is a bit of a dated story, but I'm going to dig into that straight ahead. All right, welcome back into this edition of the Talk Nats podcast, part of the Believe Podcast Network. You can find me on Twitter. It's at DanCaps218. You can find the show on Twitter. It's at Talk Nats, your home of all Nationals news. So let's dive into it. Segment 2 here, talking about the comments by Davey Martinez about it's never the coach's fault. And I was on vacation last week, so I know I'm a little bit late to the punch here, but I feel like I need to opine that I think that it's a frustrated Davey Martinez. And I think he kind of sees the lay of the land. I think that he knows that he could be on to the next one. But to be clear here, he's been here with the team through good times and bad times. But we need to see a change. And I think that, at the end of this season, I think that, it's just the Nationals are not going to turn it around this season. We know that. And I think that we have tried to retread that Davey Martinez tire many times. And I know that, he has the rapport with Rizzo and he's been here with good times and bad, but I'm ready to turn the page on both of them, Rizzo and Martinez for that matter, that I think that if, this season just tanks out, or say they don't make any big flips here, I think I'm ready to see what's behind door number 2 for both of them. So we got to do that. Let's talk about Davey Martinez. Now, look, I've been following Davey for years. I know the guy's loyal. He's passionate. He protects his people. But man, when you say this, quote, it's never on the coaches, never. They work their asses off. It's on the players, always, unquote. That's what the man said. And, not good optics. I think that I think it's a manager's job to kind of fall on the sword a little bit. It's your crew. I'm a manager where I work. And guess what? If things aren't going well, I can't say, well, it's all the people around me. They suck. How about that? No, they're like, you run this thing though, right? So that's one side of the coin. The other side of said coin is Davey is doing the best that he can with the players he has at his disposal. That's another take. It's a lot of young talent. It's a lot of, B-list to C-list veterans on this team that we're trying to keep this Nationals ship afloat. And, it's just like someone building your deck and you go, I want you to build me a deck, but let me take that nailer. Let me take, some of the lumber. Let me take some of the stringers. Let me take some of the footings from you and go, hey, man, I thought you said you wanted me to build a deck. Oh, I do want you to build that deck, but you don't need any of those tools. You'd be like, hey, man, I promised to build you this deck, but I need these tools. I mean, I might be able to fashion some pieces together and get these boards to hold together, but it's not going to be too sturdy, and the whole thing might fall apart. That is the position that Davey Martinez is in part. I'm not trying to absolve him from guilt, but to a certain extent, Davey is doing what he can do with what he has. You took away a lot of big pieces with that rebuild. Scherzer, Turner, Soto. Those are the upper echelon ones. That he's doing what he can do. That's one take on it. But that, you take a look at it. That's a lot. Now, I get the intention behind his comment. Davey's an old school guy. He played the game for many years. He was there in the dugout during the Cubs World Series run. He was in Tampa. He's seen winners, so I get it. He wants accountability. But when you say never blame the coaches, to me, It's a guy that's frustrated. Do I think he really meant that? No, but I think he's having a hard time walking that back. That's my hunch. That's a hard thing to say. But come on. I mean, that's not how baseball works. Big picture, you can't do that. He's frustrated. He might not have the tools in his tool set, but he needs to fall on the sword a little bit. It's his team. And you get hired to get fired, and he's got to know that he's got to try to squeeze as much juice out of this team as he possibly can. I get it. Players need to execute. They got to hit, field, throw strikes, but coaches have jobs too. Their job is to put players in the best spot to succeed. And if your team's been flailing at the plate for a month, we're at least going to ask some questions. Look around. The Rangers fired their offensive coordinator in May before 3.2 runs per game, after 4.1 runs per game. Now, is that coaching or is that just getting hot? The Orioles fired their guys. Well, everyone freaked. They lost 6 of 7 right after, but now they've won 13 of 19 and are back in the wild card chase. So, oftentimes people say the manager doesn't have anything to do with it. I give you 2 examples there. The first one with the Rangers, not as big of a change, but you take a look at the Orioles, who were flailing, a little bit of a difference. So sometimes a new voice just resets the room. And we're getting up to it. I cut Davey some slack by the deck analogy there. But at the end of the day, I'm not so vested into Davey Martinez that I care that much. I want winning baseball back in the district, however that manifests itself. If it's new ownership, if it's a new GM, if it's a new manager, maybe they got to just gut it, take it all the way down, then so be it. Davey said he talked to the players after these comments and everyone's all good, quote unquote. The clubhouse is tight. That's cool. But if it's not the coaches and it's not the players, then who is it? A good take here. It's ownership, for not investing in the team. The umps, who have been the worst that I've seen maybe ever, and some of it is the catchers framing, a little bit. I think that we're at the point now that we need the ABS system for balls and strikes. Keep the umps out in the field, but balls and strikes, it's not cutting it. And go to Umpire Auditor. If you know what I'm talking about. It's horrendous here lately. But look, Davey's not wrong that the game is hard. It's a grind. It's ups and downs. But also this team hasn't been had a winning season since the 2019 season. The World Series win, it was free falling after that. And we don't want this team to be free falling. I'm just saying, love Davey, respect the loyalty, but at some point, results matter. And that is what we want to see, is results from this team. All right, so coming up here after the break, we'll talk about the most recent loss, this time to the Dodgers. But it hasn't been easy here, Nats fans. Like I said, not long ago, they were on top of the world, but it has been free falling for the Nationals. I'll discuss straight ahead. All right, welcome back into this edition of the Talk Nats podcast, simulcast on the Believe in Nationals podcast feed. Again, you can check me on Twitter. It's at DanCaps218. You can find all of this, talknats.com, or on Twitter X at TalkNats. So let's roll into segment 3 and talk about the most recent play from the Nationals. MacKenzie Gore on the bump. Started the season well, all things considered, but take a look at him in the 2025 regular season: 3 wins, 7 losses. And some of that is run support. Some of it is, it's a lot of things. Last 7 games, 1-3. Last 15 games, 3-7. Last 30 games, 3-7, of course, as well. So, talking about MacKenzie Gore, and still, despite all of that, one of the key pieces, I feel, in the Nationals starting rotation. Josiah Gray, ostensibly at some point, Cade Cavalli, these kind of guys that are going to be the guys at some point. Just wait. There's more. Okay, I'm waiting to see that. So let's just take a look at the standings now, and kind of a story. Not kind of a story, is a story. The Nationals are near the bottom. Only the Marlins worst in the NL East. And take a look over at the Dodgers. First place in the NL West. And they got some room to make up here. And we're at the point of the season now. There was glimpses of greatness where we saw them in third place in the NL East ahead of the Braves, but things have come crashing back to earth here. And if you take a look at the schedule here more recently here, there's not a lot of highlights here. Dodgers 6, Nationals 5. Nationals 4, Rockies 3, Nationals 1, Rockies 3, Nationals 6, Rockies 10, Nationals 4, Rockies 6, Nationals 1, Marlins 3. How much longer do you want me to go on? Because I'm going to have to rewind the tape quite a ways before I have some bright spots. Now, for me, what are some of the bright spots as I record this? It is finally seeing Brady House, right? And, something that we've heard for quite some time. It's going to be his time sometime, and all things considered, I like him. I think that, the Nationals are at the point of the season where, just keep them up here. James Wood continues to be the dominant piece. Loving it. Dylan Cruz, we know what he's dealing with. We've seen Dalen Lyle. There's glimpses of greatness, right? And I think that this is a good season. If I'm going to, try to polish this turd the best I can, is for these young players to get some MLB experience on a team that, isn't really going anywhere. That is, some of the things that I like. So, but let's dive into that. In segment 3 here, they got off to a rough start in LA. So let's close out with something that, hit me a little different Friday night. MacKenzie Gore versus Kershaw, past versus future. Now, look, this matchup was always going to be good. 2 lefties, 2 big leg kicks, 2 deadly curveballs, but it also showed the gap. Kershaw, his reputation spoke for itself. He's getting older, beard's going gray, but the stuff still plays. Gore, he's been solid, but he got no help. So that is kind of, drilling down on those stats that I spoke of to start the segment, that, his record is not glowing. I get that. But final line for Gore, 5 2/3 innings, 4 Ks, 4 walks, 6 runs, 5 earned. But let's be real here. The damage came from the little things. Rosario's bobbles a ball. Abrams tries a glove flip, misses. Passed ball, soft single from Ohtani. It was all there. Gore even spiked the ball in frustration, and I don't blame him. You want to take a look at the other side defensively. The Nats are near the bottom in every advanced metric. So we can say blame Davey, and some of this, he's the manager of the team, and, they decided to re-up these coaches around him because obviously they were drinking some Kool-Aid that I wasn't aware of. But the Dodgers on the other side, top 5. That's the same game right there. Still, Gore's been good, really good. ERA just over 3, striking out more batters than anyone in the NL. So, yeah, that's his breaking stuff. It's legit. You don't need to convince me on MacKenzie Gore. I think that you put MacKenzie Gore on most any other team out there, that's worth their salt. I think he dominates, but the curveball can't make up for a sloppy defense. If you're looking at the silver lining, it's this. Gore's developing. The Nationals are developing. He's still climbing and on the mound in LA under those lights. And take a look what he was able to do. It had to be frustrating because LA is still a premier destination and the Dodgers organization is still a premier team. So to fail under the big lights, there's big lights in DC, but those lights burn extra bright and burn extra hot in LA. And it was hard. He didn't have Kershaw's command, but he had the presence. And if the Nats can build a better defense behind him, watch out. If those bats can come alive, watch out. You take a look at it here before we wrap here. As I don't think I need to belabor the point, I went over the losing record there, and I went over the losing game. Fingers crossed that they can, get back in the win column. I mean, we got it at some point, right? Is that Dylan Cruz, one of the other branches, to circle back, a callback from the earlier in the show. Swinging the bat, that's huge. No return date yet, but we'll take that progress. He's on the road trip. So let's hope we can see him, back before August, that I want to get a good look at this team. with Wood, Cruz, ostensibly Lyle out there. I know we've seen Jake Young out there and Call and all these different guys, and Brady House. I mean, what's the point right now? I mean, they're cutting their teeth with major league experience. I'm talking more House and Lyle, these kind of guys. That what could it hurt? You know, they could maybe play more competitive ball at a lower level, but I don't think anything really replaces major league experience, right? So I think that, you know, the Nationals, they're not playing well. And I know that. And you know that from watching this show. But we're hoping that better days lie ahead. We hope that Rizzo has something up his sleeve. So I don't have to keep coming to you with these shows about the Nationals suck. I hate doing that. But at the end of the day, just take it for what it is. Development. Hopefully we can flip some of these players, and hopefully we can talk about winning baseball soon, relatively. How soon is that? I guess time will only tell. All right. Once again, I want to thank you for joining me on this edition of the Talk Nats podcast, part of the Believe Podcast Network. Check them out at Talk Nats. Also, like I said, this show also on the Believe in Nationals podcast feed. But do me a favor on this show to help it grow. When you're listening on Apple, when you're listening on Spotify, subscribe, give it a 5-star rating to help add wind to the sails. Also, I will post these shows like this one from time to time on YouTube. I'll put the link for YouTube in the show description. All right. Once again, I want to thank you for joining me on this edition of the Talk Nats podcast, and I'll talk to you again next time.